This is Real Talk from WKGC Public Media, the place where you can join the cinematic conversations frame by frame each week. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. If movies are your thing, give us a ring, 850-772-6803. You can also send a message on the WKGC Facebook page or email us at wkgcnews@wkgc.org. Today we are reviewing the Fantastic Four, First Steps, the latest release in the insatiable blob that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then later we will talk about some of our favorite superhero or comic book movies. Is the fourth time the charm? Or fifth, if you count the mostly unreleased Roger Corman movie from 1994. Rest in peace, Mr. Corman. You be the judge. After my guest and I surf into Marvel's First Family. Joining me today is returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Adam Donato.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to talk about movies today.
It's wonderful to have you back, Adam. Listeners, as you may remember from past episodes, Adam is a member of the Critics Association of Central Florida, of which I too am a member, and co-host of the Adam and Steve Show on YouTube and contributor to Disappointment Media. Thanks for being here today, Adam.
No place I'd rather be.
Wonderful. Listeners, again, we are reviewing the latest cinematic adaptation of Marvel's First Family, the Fantastic Four, First Steps, now in cinemas nationwide. 850-772-6803 to join the discussion. Adam, what did you think of Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four, First Steps?
I just turned 26, so when I was a kid, the two big superheroes for me were the Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Spider-Man 3. And so, watching a movie that feels like a remake in a lot of ways of Rise of the Silver Surfer is kind of surreal. I wish I was 8 years old when I watched this movie, because this is everything I would have wanted from that movie. The Tim Story movies are too much of, them hanging out, too sitcom-y. And this is this big, epic, special effects bonanza, and that's really what I wanted as a kid. So it's really fulfilling to now finally get that.
All right, fantastic, your reaction there. But for me, I think somewhere Dr. Doom is laughing because the real villain here is the script. So I'm eager to get into it with you, Adam, because I think we're have on two different ends of the spectrum on this movie, but that always makes for great radio talk. For me, this one, boasts this eye-catching retro futuristic aesthetic, and a welcoming return of a classically evil villain, but ultimately I feel that it stumbles narratively with a lopsided screenplay. But before we get into too deep into the movie here, Adam, how about you bring us up to speed on the latest from its box office performance?
Yes, so opening weekend, we came in at a hot $118 million domestically with an extra $100 internationally. This is revolutionary for the franchise, as the first installment, I think, was just about $54 million, and then I think the Rise of Silver Surfer only went up $3 million more, so they're $57 million. But we were trending in the downward direction with Fantastic being a total failure, making 25 opening weekend, and it's a total domestically only being what the opening weekend was for the original. So this is amazing, not only for the Fantastic Four franchise, but also for the MCU, as Thunderbolts came in just around 75, and Brave New World also came in just around 88. So Marvel is experiencing a high at the current moment. That being said, they still came in $7 million below Superman, which really makes it shines a light on how much of an issue it seems in hindsight to put Fantastic just behind Superman and also Jurassic World, especially with this year having 3 MCU movies. You thought that they would have spread them out a little bit, maybe push this one closer to November. Especially since we're not getting another one until late July next year with Spider-Man, New World, some new world for Spider-Man.
Yeah. So you brought up Superman, and that's something I wanted to ask you. Is we have another big franchise movie, long-standing IP released just 3 weeks ago, and so looking at the box office performance from Superman in its first week or two. well, let's just take maybe its first weekend, and then looking at the first weekend of this movie, do you see them doing comparably as well to one another, or do you see one of these is going to wind up being the runaway IP franchise hit of the summer?
I think it's definitely going to be close, but Superman has the lead just from opening weekend alone, and I think it'll maintain the lead. I do think that is a more complete, full, impactful, good movie. I do think that this will have enough detractors, like you said. I do think that they both will do very, very well. Like currently, just from opening weekend, it's already the 13th highest grossing movie at the domestic box office. And if it has like a very normal second week drop, then it will already be in the top 10. I just think that Superman just has also the advantage because it's been way longer since we had a Superman movie than it was since we had a Fantastic Four. Well, not way longer, just a year, but still, I just feel like with Superman, it just has those extra 2 weeks of primetime summer, and whereas this is going to run into August a lot quicker with kids going back to school. So I'd go Superman.
So looking at the release calendar, though, it doesn't appear that there's any other big box office, IP releases between now and Labor Day, unless I'm missing one. So the conversation at the end of the summer is going to be somewhere with the Jurassic World movies, Superman, Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts in that conversation. Can you think of any others that are going to each vie for who was the number one big franchise IP this summer?
We talked about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. That's currently sitting at 8 in the top 10. How to Train Your Dragon sitting at 6. Lilo and Stitch sitting at 420. So I guess, by just total numbers, Lilo and Stitch is clearly the franchise blockbuster of the summer.
Okay. Interesting there. I would have expected it to be one of the others, but we'll be able to see what story this summer tells us when we go back later and kind of read what the box office is telling us about what gets them out of their living rooms and into the cinema. I think that's where it should always go, but, there are many of those who think, just watch it at home. So we'll kind of see what story is being told to us come the end of the summer. So Adam, if you could, for those that may not have seen the movie, in a nutshell, seen this movie, Fantastic Four, The First Steps, tell us in a nutshell what's it all about.
So a key thing for the uninitiated to understand about this film is that it is in the MCU, but it takes place on a different Earth, like in a different dimension.
It's Earth 828, if I remember the title card correctly, which I'm like, we need to end this whole multiverse thing. I don't know where you sit on the multiverse, Adam, but I'm so sick and tired of multiverses. Let's just pick one universe, preferably the one in which we currently live, and we will tell our stories from there, because I cannot keep track of Earth 828 from Earth 626. A little Lilo and Stitch nod there. So,
yeah. I understand where you're coming from, because usually the multiverse stuff usually just leads to, like, very lowbrow, like, fan service type stuff, and then that's not really, what we go to the movies for. Yeah. But I also do think it presents new opportunities. I think under initial reaction, I wouldn't have wanted to see the Hugh Jackman Wolverine team up with Ryan Reynolds Deadpool because, the story's already over with Logan. Yeah. But after the movie we got, I was very happy with that. People love No Way Home, but that's where I can really relate with you, because I was like, that whole movie's just quoting the Spider-Man movies from my childhood that I like more than this.
I know, it's funny how in a lot of the fan service we see and nods to, references to, and even Easter eggs are here. Let's remind you of this much better movie. Remember this? We're going to remind you of this much better movie. And so that seems to be where things are sometimes, at least in what we've had here in the last little while. Whenever it comes to that, it's just like, remember that, and it seems to always be a much better movie. If you have nothing else to add on sort of our box office opening here, Adam, are you ready to surf into this cinematic relaunch of Fantastic Four?
I would say that's a fantastic idea.
See, all the dad jokes are supposed to be mine, but I don't mind sharing the stage every now and again. First, I'd like to talk about the stylistic choices made for the movie. how did the film's 1960s retro futuristic aesthetic impact your enjoyment of the story, Adam? Did it elevate it, to an experience, or maybe distract you from the film's narrative? What did you think? What did you think about the overall aesthetic of the film?
I think the overall aesthetic is kind of one of the premier aspects about this movie. I think it fits the Fantastic Four really well, because they're very throwback 50s, good America, type vibe to it. And I think that one of the problems with the MCU is that all the films feel exactly the same. That's one thing James Gunn came out and said. He wants all of his new DC movies to have completely different vibes. And because you're sacrificing your individuality for corporate synergy, that ends up making every movie kind of glob together and feel the same. So here you have distinctive aesthetic choices that are making this movie stand apart from the rest of the movies in the MCU. And then I also think that that's made the marketing even more interesting, because you're able to see a lot of the world. We're building a world here, and you have to establish this world really well, because it's a completely different world. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is going to be a huge, ambitious jump in a way for a lot of audiences who won't understand that concept. So I think it looks really pretty. Another complaint with the MCU is it doesn't have a litany of great scores, and this one has a fantastic one. I didn't mean to do that. Fantastic one. But yeah, I'm all for the aesthetic. I think that's like one of the best aspects of the movie. How about you?
Oh, I agree. That is what I enjoyed. What I enjoyed most about the movie is it's stylistically very different from the kind of gray, drab MCU I feel that we've had in so many of the movies. It's this whole like utilitarian color scheme. It's like that meme that we've mentioned on the show before, and you may have seen it, Adam, where you have the 80s or 90s McDonald's versus the McDonald's today, and the one from the 80s and 90s is full of a lot of earth tones with the characters and the play place, and then you have the new McDonald's, which is very utilitarian looking with grayscale colors, straight lines, no characters, no play place, and it's like going from a happy childhood to a depressing adult or something like that. And so I like that we have, I like that we're channeling this 1960s look, which also connects it with the animated series, which I thought this film did really well without leaning too much into it, just acknowledging it's out there. And I believe it. If we had real superheroes around, I could totally see animated series based off of them. But I'd say this commitment to the 1960s retro-futuristic aesthetic was very bold. I think it feels like that it's like leaping right off of the page of, I think it's what comic book aficionados call the silver age of comic books, or your Saturday morning cartoons. So I love how it does that. A lot of circles, a lot of clean and other curved architecture, a lot of bright colors, the jumpsuits, and it's sort of this analog meets digital technology. Occasionally I'm taken out of it a little because it's like, okay, so we have flying police cars, but everything else seems to be still based on the traditional internal combustion engine, and even the pregnancy test. It's at the beginning of the film, folks, so it's not a spoiler. And it's just like, it's a very futuristic looking pregnancy test, and it's just like, okay, I don't know how that really fits in with this world. So occasionally I think things that should have been more analog were digital, but by and large, really enjoyed the whole the world building of the movie and this intersection of analog and digital, which I think has something like the Fantastic Four happened in the 1960s. It probably has something like that. But I absolutely loved the look of the movie, and it was very warm. I think so often some superhero movies can feel kind of cold and bland, but this one it's warm and it's charming, and so the entire world I really enjoyed. What were some of the things that you enjoyed most about this whole kind of a reimagined 1960s look of the movie?
Well, I really enjoyed. Like you said, you talked about the future technology, but we're in the past, so like I could see how that could very easily become like a thing that I would focus on and nitpick on if I wasn't engaged with the story. be like, well, how do they have this, but they don't have phones or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I really like it. I mean, I specifically like the costumes, the throwback old costumes with the light blue and the white. One of my big problems, and you said this as well about the world of the MCU usually feels very utilitarian. One of the things I was most interested in going into this movie, especially compared to where Marvel had been recently, is Thunderbolts really disappointed me because I like superheroes with colorful costumes and superpowers. And none of the Thunderbolts had any of that, and here we have these flashy, nice uniforms. Everyone's got, every single member of the Fantastic Four has a cooler power than every single member of the Thunderbolts. And so I really do feel like this was going in a direction that I much more care for as a superhero movie. But that's what I was saying about the multiverse. I think having that at your disposal really allows you to take big leaps like this and to go into a different time period, make it look and feel visually distinct. And I do like what you said about it feeling warm. I feel like that less comes from the world that they're in and more so the chemistry between the four leads. I really liked how, especially Ben. I feel like you said the word warm. I wrote that on my card after the screening. I said that's how I felt about Ben, who I really feel like could have very easily been this loud, over the top, comedic relief side guy, kind of like David Harbour in Thunderbolts, but he's very grounded. Yeah, that's, I guess, also a pun because he's a rock guy. But I definitely agree with that warm feeling.
I can appreciate your sentiment. So, Adam, does Fantastic Four First Steps feel like a film with something to say, or is it just another chapter in the larger content machine? And I don't mean something to say like social commentary, but more along the lines of, say, artistic intent versus franchise obligations in superhero cinema. What do you think?
I would lean, even though I really like this movie, I would lean closer to just another chapter in a larger content machine. Because while I do feel like the movie is ambitious with, how it's trying to represent Galactus and the Silver Surfer and the whole different universe, we're back in the 60s, I do feel like the story feels like an episode of television, which makes sense because the director is a television director. But I don't know, I just didn't feel like anyone really had a good tangible arc. I feel like it is a very epic story that we're talking about here, and it feels like it's crammed into just under 2 hours. There's a lot of talk on social media about how we feel like there's a director's cut, 20 to 30 extra minutes of footage that we're not seeing here. For example, I know the deleted scene of Ben on the dating game, which would have been really fun and fill out that world. But no, I would definitely agree that it's much more of a, just another Saturday night morning cartoon in this large content machine, which is what it's trying to be,
So, the colleague of yours and mine, Sean Bowman, who runs Disappointed
Love Sean.
Media, he characterized the movie as feeling like it was focus group to death, or it was something like that. Which sounds similar to what you just stated, with a lot of the celluloid, figuratively speaking, left on the floor and feeling like another part of the content machine. And when I look at it, I get it kind of feels like filler, where there was, it seems to be like a chapter missing before, and then we get into the whole argument, well, do we really need to see how they got all their powers again? Kind of like how many times do you need to see, Uncle Ben die? But it's, that said, it still feels like we're dropped into something as it's happening, not in a good way. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock, famously said, drop people in the middle of the action, but there's still this preface that comes before. So there's still a setup, before you're dropped into this action. And so it does feel like it was checking off a bunch of boxes, perhaps, that maybe focus groups did have, and it sounds very much in line with what you were saying. But we're going to continue the discussion here after the break, listeners. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today we are talking about the Fantastic Four First Steps, now in cinemas nationwide. My guest today is film critic and friend of the show, Adam Donato. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. Have you seen the movie or have questions about it? You can join our conversation on air. Call 850-772-6803 or send us a message on the WKGC Facebook page or email us at wkgcnews@wkgc.org. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is WKGC's Chef Chris, host of Doing Dinner. Every Thursday, I teach you how to create a different themed dinner party that your guests will find deliciously fun. You can also call to join me on air to ask me any questions about this week's dinner party or anything else culinary or hospitality on your mind. In case you can't listen live, you can also listen later through your favorite podcast service. Let's create an experience together. Doing Dinner, Thursdays at noon on 90.7 WKGC.
People are who build community. The self-starters, the friendly neighbors, the ambitious workers. And that's exactly who our members are. We're PCU. And with us, banking is made better. So whether you need a rewards checking account, financial products that assist with travel, easy business loans, or affordable auto loans, come see us so we can build the community together. Panhandle Credit Union. Banking made better. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing lender.
Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. Today we are talking about Marvel Studios' The Fantastic Four First Steps, now in cinemas nationwide. I am joined by returning guest and friend of the show, film critic Adam Donato. If you want to talk about the movie, give us a call, 850-772-6803. For a franchise reboot that proudly wears its jet-age design language on its sleeves, from the sleek, chrome-laced labs to wardrobe choices, which you talked a lot about, Adam, all evoking this evocative sense of Tomorrowland for those that enjoy going to Magic Kingdom, either around the world, particularly here in either Orlando or out in Anaheim. And so you get that idea, and I feel like that we are kind of in Tomorrowland, so to speak. It's ironic that the narrative propulsion of this film, in my opinion anyway, feels very grounded. It's in the screenplay where I take a lot of my issues with the movie, Adam. But what did you think as we start digging more into the narrative of Fantastic Four First Steps?
I think my problems with the screenplay are more in a larger sense. You said that the movie feels like, or Sean said that it feels like it was focus group to death. Mm-hmm. I think that has to be the case, because if we strike out again with this franchise, with this property, then we're toast. We just had so many failed attempts. But like I said, I have a bigger problem with it fitting into the larger part of the MCU, because I kind of had a feeling that, like I felt at the end of Age of Ultron, where I was like, oh, I kind of thought that this was going to set up the next movie more. This was going to kind of lead into the big Avengers conflict more than it did. But it does feel like it's this own truncated, small little episode of a thing. So that's one of the problems that I have, especially the pacing as well. I feel is very off. I don't know. You just tell by the runtime. It's really weird that this exact movie is sub 2 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, especially when a lot of the Marvel movies have been clocking in at much longer. When I sit down to a movie, I jokingly say, you get a star just for being under 2 hours. And it's a joke, because some stories do need longer than 2 hours. But we've had so many movies come out, and it's across genres. This is not, aimed at the MCU, or directly, because we've had a cross-genre. A lot of movies are like way in excess of 2 hours, and a lot of times they're just padded for time. It's like, we did not need 2.5 hours to tell this story. This one, though, I must say, I could have gone for a little more development with one character in particular. And on that note, had the screenplay been better developed, then it may have actually been a fantastic superhero movie. I'd say the first act overstays its welcome by devoting undue time to the setup that really borders on exposition overload. Of course, that could be characteristic of sci-fi movies from the 1950s and 60s. We certainly did get a lot of exposition during that time, but I think in the case of this movie, it's probably unintentional. By the time the plot begins to move forward, I'd say the second act just like flies by, and it almost feels like a montage of conflicts and discoveries, really depriving us, the audience, particularly those that don't follow the comics, don't follow the TV counterparts to a lot of the MCU movies that are out there now. And so I don't feel I got that organic development that I needed. And here at the end, just as the stakes are positioned to crescendo, the third act just fumbles on its own climax, setting in, for a resolution that feels much more contractual. Getting back to like the focus group, I think it's a great analogy that Sean had. Feels much more contractual than cathartic, and I appreciate the under 2 hour runtime, as I stated before. But I would not be surprised if there were entire scenes and sequences left on the cutting room floor.
Mm. One thing you said earlier that I actually really agree with is you brought up that you didn't really like the exposition of the Fantastic Four and how they got their powers and came to be, and you felt like that was clunky. Mm-hmm. I also agree. It feels like that's a very like lazy expository way where we're just having a lot of information thrown at us real quick, and then we know this information, but also it just doesn't really feel entirely necessary to me, especially since I'm like engaged in the MCU and what's going on and what these characters are. But I understand that the layman's might need this more. And you brought up how the end of the movie really fumbles with its climax. I think that it does really simplify there at the end and does very much so become very Saturday morning cartoon. Yeah. And I know a lot of people's complaint is the CGI specifically looks very wonky, which I have a hard time really coming down on. Do I believe that there's a giant man walking around New York? No. But also, like, we pitched a fit for, like, 2 decades because Galactus was inside of a cloud. Why do you think he was inside of a cloud? Because we can't effectively, like, create a realistic-looking, like, gigantic space god. So it's kind of like a darned if you do, darned if you don't kind of thing.
Did you get either Godzilla or even Mighty Morphin Power Ranger kind of feelings as he's like walking through the city? Because it's just like, you look like Goldar just after Rita had supersized you walking through Angel Grove, and I'm looking at it, and obviously the CG is good. I'm not I'm on record as not being a fan of proliferated CG in general. However, I do think the CG looked good. So I was never taken out by the CG. I thought for what Galactus looked fine. But as soon as he was walking through downtown, I thought, this looks like the showdown from an episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, just with updated CG. Did you get that, or maybe kind of a Godzilla hues from how that was executed?
I think it definitely looks silly, and I'm totally fine with that. It's a movie about a rock guy and a stretchy dude, so I'm very forgiving of it looking silly. And then also when it comes to the size, I did feel like he was like effectively huge. Like he seemed bigger than like we just saw Superman. He fights a big like some kind of reptile amphibian monster. Yeah. And like Galactus is way bigger than that. You know what I mean? Like I really felt the scale of this character is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So I like how in the film that we're focusing on a smaller group of people, and I think when you have a small central cast of characters, it gives the writer, the director, a lot more room to explore these characters, and the chemistry. You said earlier that the four of them had really great chemistry with one another. I'm of the opinion that we have two groups of two that have really great chemistry, but I'm not convinced that the four of them have great chemistry together. I'd say that Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, Pedro Pascal, and Vanessa Kirby, I think they have really good chemistry with one another. I really like Kirby's character from the Mission Impossible franchise, and I think with Joseph Quinn and Moss Bachrach, who's playing the Thing, I'd say the two of them. So we have the Human Torch and the Thing. They have really good chemistry. I just wasn't buying the chemistry between the four of them together. Like, two of them, separately, great, but not when they were together. But, I'm interested because you say they do have great chemistry with the four of them. So I would like to know if you could elaborate a little bit more on your take from our group's chemistry, Adam.
I like what you said about it's more like 2 and 2, because I would agree with that. I think that I wasn't really jazzed about this cast going into this movie because I just felt like a lot of them were cast just to be celebrities. Like Pedro Pascal talked about how he practiced this like 50s accent, and they were like, no, just talk like Pedro Pascal. And that's very uninspiring to me. But Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby have light years more chemistry than Jessica Alba and Ian Griffon from the Tim Story movies, and then there was no chemistry with anyone at all in Fan Four Stick. So already this movie is light years ahead. And then Ben and Johnny, just all the bickering between the two of them and their relationship together, I feel like was really well exemplified here. Yeah,
I enjoy, particularly with Human Torch and the Thing, Joseph Quinn, and I forget the gentleman's name. I know his last name is Moss Bachrach, the gentleman that
Ivan Moss Bachrach.
That's it, Ivan Moss Bachrach, who played the Thing. I loved watching them. I think they had the makings for a TV show. Like, I could see the two of them, I think, kind of classic sitcom style. The two of them could sustain the laughter in a room. So I thought they played off one another really well. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that, because we get a little of that here and there. And although I did not need this to, for this to be, the comedy between them to overshadow anything else in the movie, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more about the comedy between them, because I agree with you that those two in particular had really good comedic chemistry that was delivered flawlessly, that it just seamlessly woven into everything else. I really bought them as family, slash friends, over a long period of time.
Well, I think the thing that's maddening about this movie, I mean, I do think it's the ideal big screen representation of these characters, but we got mad at the Tim Story movies because there was too much hanging out and not enough big blockbuster action. And then in this movie, it's like, well, we got the blockbuster action, but I kind of wish we had more time to hang out with these characters, which would have solved a lot of these issues. We'd had more time to develop them as a group. So it's just funny because it's like we're kind of, we can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it too, kind of a thing. You got to kind of sacrifice something.
I want to shift gears here and talk about our villains. I really enjoyed the return to a classic villain, but did Fantastic Four First Steps finally get the villains right? And do you think audiences are, say, starved for truly evil villains in this age of morally gray bad guys? And so I want to talk about Galactus first, but then you move into Silver Surfer. But what did you think? Did the movie finally get the villain right?
For Galactus, I mean, yeah, like I said, we complained ad nauseum about him being a cloud, so the fact that he's a giant dude walking around is awesome. He doesn't have a lot of depth whatsoever, but I do like the element of it being personal because of what Galactus wants specifically for the Fantastic Four team. I'm not going to say because I don't know how much spoilery that is. But so it kind of adds this like personal layer to the situation because they both have something or someone that they want to protect. But yeah, like I said, very shallow Saturday morning cartoon. Like I'm the big evil bad guy, fear me, which is fine for this.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the return of our classic villain. So often modern cinema and television go to great lengths to demonstrate how villains are merely misunderstood or solely formed by societal factors, but not Galactus and how he's presented. He's neither misunderstood nor sympathetic. He's just plain evil. And in an era wherein antagonists or villains are so often softened by tragic backstories or moral ambiguity, the choice the movie made to lean into a classically malevolent foe is surprisingly refreshing. I feel the character brings weight and threat to the movie, and he stands as a reminder that sometimes the best villains are the ones who just simply like being bad. Another villain we have, or I guess, well, without getting into spoiler territory, the other villain we have in here is the Silver Surfer, and I'd just like to ask you, Adam, because you know way more about the MCU than I do. It sounds like you have a strong understanding of the comic books and of the TV series, and so I got a question for you here. What is the point of Silver Surfer? Was she just a cosmic cameo, wasted potential, or just was she the setup for something bigger? Because Julia Garner, I think Julia Garner's a fantastic actress. I'd like to see more of her on screen with better screenplays. But I'd like to see more of her on screen. But Julia Garner's Silver Surfer feels incredibly underdeveloped, if not completely wasted. So tell me more about why Silver Surfer is even in this movie.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to venture a guess that she was one of the elements of the movie that was cut down. Because one of the things that people were complaining about a lot, rightfully so or not, was, oh my God, the Silver Surfer is a woman. I can't handle this.
Yeah, I heard
and
that.
And it is a different character. So like and it doesn't bother me because they still serve the same purpose. That character's job is to show up, to say, hey, Galactus is coming, and to kind of help Galactus and tell, hey, maybe I shouldn't help Galactus. So I feel like it fills that role. I will say I did enjoy here how she had a specific relationship with Johnny as opposed to Rise of the Silver Surfer, where the Silver Surfer felt like it had that personal connection with Invisible Woman. So I feel like that gave Johnny a little bit more to do here. But I agree, it's very underdeveloped, and when they explain kind of like her backstory and her internal like conflict, like what she's got going on, it was very rushed, very like, yeah, you know, like, her deal.
So when I'm watching the Silver Surfer, and I knew about the whole man-woman Silver Surfer, argument going into this. I couldn't care less. I was also told in some multiverse somewhere in some comic book there is a female Silver Surfer. I think for the purposes of this movie, it doesn't matter. It's just we have the Silver Surfer, and the Silver Surfer is there to do things. But I kind of feel the Silver Surfer was just a plot device. And to your point, Adam, a lot of what we may be missing is on the cutting room floor. Because I feel that you can remove Silver Surfer from this story and it largely play out the same way. There's a couple of things that Silver Surfer does that, wouldn't be done if Silver Surfer wasn't there. But for the most part, I think you could remove the Silver Surfer and the story still play out much in the same way. Am I not giving Silver Surfer enough credit, or do you agree with that?
Well, one thing that I think makes the Silver Surfer a key component of this movie is the best scene in this movie, and honestly, I think the best scene in any Marvel movie in recent memory is the interstellar chase scene that happens when the Fantastic Four are returning back to Earth. It did feel like it was very inspired by Interstellar. It was kind of like nothing we'd seen before. I mean, we've seen space battles, especially in the MCU. But it was so interesting in the way that he would shoot the cannon or laser or whatever, and it would warp, and so like having to aim it in such a way, and everything with the black hole to try to resolve that situation, like especially in IMAX, this was a jaw-dropping sequence. But other than that, though, I agree. It does feel very stock and doesn't have as much going on besides that one scene.
So we've touched on a lot of different areas here, Adam, but before we go into our next break, is there anything else that you want to mention that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet with Fantastic Four First Steps?
I really like the movie. I would like to nitpick about the credits scenes. I think that specifically, it's not talking about what happens in them, but the general concept of Marvel credit scenes, I feel like has gone down over time. So there's one that's like a joke scene, and there's one that's like a tease scene. That's usually kind of the vibe. And I felt like the tease didn't give me any new information and didn't excite me in the way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
And things have come out about that sequence. They're about who is in the, whatever. But I don't know. I just feel like it kind of feels cheap. It feels like they have no idea where they're going, which the best thing about the MCU in the 2010s, at least, was it felt like we had a clear roadmap and there was a vision and direction of where we're going. And so seeing a teaser scene like that, especially when I'm still hearing stuff about the script for Doomsday isn't even finished, I'm like, you guys have no idea, and you're just trying to play it safe so that you could, plaster any storyline onto this scene,
Exactly. To the movie's credit, though, audiences can watch it, at least from my perspective, because I don't follow the TV shows. I feel audiences can watch it without having to know too much about the Fantastic Four. Just general knowledge is sufficient enough. You don't need to watch any of the preceding movies or TV series. I've seen the blog posts where it's like, you need to watch this, and this to really get everything. Well, and I like how if you watch those things, it does probably give greater appreciation for it. But you don't have to watch all of those. When it's all said and done, Fantastic Four First Steps is sufficiently enjoyable, doesn't overstay its welcome, and does feel like a late summer movie. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But we're going to take a break here in just a moment. You're listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, Ryan R.L. Terry. Today we've been talking about Fantastic Four, The First Steps, now in cinemas nationwide. My returning guest is film critic and friend of the show, Adam Donato. When we come back, we're going to wrap up any last thoughts we have on this movie, but then we're going to talk about our favorite superhero or comic book movies of all time. Join the discussion. Let us know what your favorite superhero movies are. 850-772-6803. Send us a message on the WKGC Facebook page or email us at wkgcnews@wkgc.org. We'll be right back after this break.
You are about to enjoy the most thrilling music you have ever heard from records. Listen.
Jazz in a minor key, an authentic mix of jazz standards, Latin jazz, traditional jazz, big band, and jazz interpretations of the Great American Songbook. Jazz in a minor key.
Weekday afternoons from 1 till 3 on GC 90.7 FM.
On 90.7 WKGC Public Media, every day is powered by you. Your support plays a vital role in delivering programming along the Emerald Coast that educates, entertains, and informs. From news to music to special interest shows hosted by local voices, you'll find it all right here. Join our community of listener supporters today. Visit WKGC.org for more information. Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, Ryan R.L. Terry. My guest today is friend of the show and film critic Adam Donato. Before the break, we were talking about the Fantastic Four First Steps, now in cinemas nationwide. But now I'd like to broaden... Well, first of all, anything left to say, Adam, before we move into our last segment here on the show? Any other last thoughts on Fantastic Four?
No, I'm very happy with what we got. It felt like a movie that was fulfilling for me as a response to movies from my childhood. I think it's the best MCU movie of the year, and I am excited to see what we have going forward with these characters in the MCU.
Yes, and without giving away what is in that second cutscene, mid-credit little teaser, I like what I saw because it reminded me of a particular attraction at Islands of Adventure, and so I liked what I saw, and so I'll just leave it at that. And so if those are fans of the Fantastic Four and have been to Universal's Islands of Adventure, you may be able to make the connection there. But I like the look I saw because it reminded me of that attraction at Islands of Adventure. So as you've heard it here, folks, sufficiently enjoyable. Whether you're just a casual moviegoer or if you eat, sleep, breathe the MCU, sounds like it's a winner all the way around. So if you haven't seen it, you may want to go out and check it out, particularly on a big screen with that one scene that Adam was talking about. But now, Adam, I'd like to broaden our discussion to some of our favorite superhero or comic book movies of all time. And listeners, let us know your favorites. 850-772-6803 to join us live on air. Adam, you're my guest today, so why don't you start our discussion off?
Oh, well, my favorite director is M. Night Shyamalan. So one of my favorite superhero movies or trilogies, I guess, would be the Eastrail 177 trilogy that contains Unbreakable, Split, and Glass. I remember being completely shocked that he was even going to be a trilogy. He's my favorite director. Unbreakable is my favorite movie of his. So when I found out that Split was connected to it, that we would get the ensuing Glass movie, I was so shocked because it's the sequel that nobody besides I feel like me asked for. But I love the performances. I think that's Sam Jackson's best performance in Unbreakable. I think that's James McAvoy's best performance in Split. And I know a lot of people have problems with Glass, which I do think is the weakest of three. But I'm a big fan of what M. Night was able to do with that and what he was saying overall, largely about comic book characters and superheroes in the real world.
And I discovered the films out of order because of when I began watching them. When I watched Split, then I was like, oh, Bruce Willis, what is this? And so I actually go back through, and so I watched them out of order, and I agree with you. It's one that doesn't get talked about enough. I'm really glad you brought it up, Adam, because it is to quote our movie today, a fantastic comic book movie. A great cast. I mean, particularly with Bruce Willis. That was all it took for me. I see a Bruce Willis cameo, and I don't understand the cameo, so I have to ask those around me, what, Bruce Willis? This was kind of out of nowhere. And then I'm filled in later. Oh, well, Bruce Willis, da-da-da-da. So I go back, watch the movies, like, wow, this is really good. I wish this is what we had in Glass. I was mostly disappointed by Glass, although there were certain elements about it that I liked. But I really enjoyed seeing Bruce Willis as a different kind of character. I like getting to see him in, he will forever be John McClane, but I also like seeing him in Death Becomes Her and in superhero movies. And so I think it gives us a great appreciation for the range that Bruce Willis really has as an actor.
Oh, yeah, he's amazing. I love these movies so much. I think that you talked about seeing the scene with Bruce Willis. I could tell just from the score because I was such a big Unbreakable fan, and so I was geeking out in the theater. It was an all-time experience for me. But I love all of these movies.
Unbreakable, great mention there. For me, any discussion that centers around superhero or comic book movies, I will always be an apologist for what I describe as the greatest comic book movie of all time, bar none, and that is Tim Burton's circus-themed, German expressionism-soaked Batman Returns with Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Danny DeVito. Michelle Pfeiffer as the definitive Catwoman. I rewatch Batman Returns probably every single year. I think it is the best comic book movie of all time because it feels like a comic book page on the screen. And I think so often Batman Returns is misremembered as just being another early 90s sequel, but it's way more than a commercial follow-up to Tim Burton's 1989 blockbuster Batman, which really gave rise to all the cinematic superhero movies we have today. You know, they can all of them trace their roots back to Tim Burton's breakout 1989 Batman with Jack Nicholson, Kim Basinger, and of course Michael Keaton as, in my opinion, the definitive Batman. And while I would describe Batman 89 as a Batman movie directed by Tim Burton, Batman Returns is very much a Tim Burton film that just happens to have Batman characters in it. The German expressionism over realism, we have a lot of very rich characters. I say we have characters really more as a metaphor than we do as just the characters themselves. We can explore a lot about society in each of these characters. What's funny is this is Batman Returns, but you know who has the least amount of screen time in Batman Returns? Batman. So way more of the screen time is devoted to Catwoman and the Penguin. And I'd say each of them is less a villain than a symbol. Selina Kyle's transformation into Catwoman is psychological rebirth, a violent reclaiming of agency and identity. The Penguin, not a criminal mastermind, but a grotesque figure of society's creation, so to speak. Tragically seeking acceptance while out, for revenge based on his bitterness. And so I love watching their arcs, and it is a character story. It's not so much about the mask. It is about the man or the woman behind the mask. I think the film does a great job of exploring themes of gender, power, and trauma, and it's so thoroughly entertaining. I say we could characterize it as an art house film masquerading around as a superhero movie. Never betrays its comic book roots. It embraces the absurdity, camp, and theatricality that we associated with Tim Burton, particularly in the 80s and 90s. And I could go on talking about it, but what are your thoughts on Batman Returns, Adam?
I love how passionate you are about it. I think that you said you watch it just about every year. Yeah. I try to throw it on as well around Christmas time.
Yes, it is. It is a Christmas movie, listeners. Add it to your Christmas lineup. It's just like, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Batman Returns is also a Christmas movie. In fact, the very last line of the movie is Merry Christmas, peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and then Bruce Wayne adds, and women, as he's holding Selina Kyle's cat.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you bring up the end scene. I think it's one of my favorite last moments of a Batman film, a very melancholy type vibe. I also think that I really like how bold it is with its interpretation of the Penguin. You've got the penguin flippers and whatnot, big, nose beak thing. I agree. Michelle Pfeiffer is my Catwoman. I mean, I love Zoe Kravitz and Anne Hathaway. I don't really think that we've missed, besides Halle Berry, which I can enjoy in a camp kind of way.
Yeah.
But Michelle Pfeiffer is wonderful in that role, and I really do appreciate how that movie pushed the boundaries so hard. We wouldn't have gotten the Joel Schumacher Batman movies and how much of a reaction, like a contrast that those are, if this one didn't really, cement itself as one of the, I think at that point in time, the darkest comic books.
Oh, it's very dark. Today. It's a very dark movie. Some fun fact about the movie is the scene of Catwoman with the whip in the Max Schreck department store. A lot of nods to classic German expressionist films. Max Schreck is a nod to Nosferatu. And when she takes the whip and knocks the heads off of the mannequins, done in one take. That was Michelle Pfeiffer in the costume, not a stunt double, one take wonder, knocked off all the heads on the mannequins. It's really incredible stuff here. But I want to get to a couple more titles here. So what's another title you have for us, Adam? Another one of your favorite comic book or superhero movies?
Oh, I never watched the Teen Titans. I was aware that they existed. But one night, late night, just decided to throw on, for completionist sake, the Teen Titans Go to the Movies. And boy, did I fall in love with this little group of rascals, man. They are so funny. They have so much personality. I love that movie is about superhero movies and is a meta commentary about the genre itself. I love that it's a musical and there's some really good songs in the film. And I really like the personal beef with the villain Slade in the movie. I understand that people will dog on it because they like the darker and more, mature television show Teen Titans. But I feel like and I never even watched Teen Titans Go, but I feel like because I didn't, wasn't ingrained with that's what the Teen Titans are, I was able to open my heart to this so much. And it's one I find myself rewatching relentlessly, and everyone's hatred for it only makes me grow stronger.
I haven't seen it before, so I'm afraid I don't have anything to add to that. But listeners, if that sounds like something that you would find entertaining, check it out. Adam has certainly painted a compelling description for me, so maybe something that I want to check out sometime. Another one that I love mentioning, Batman '89 I could mention, but I talked a lot about, Batman, previously. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about X-Men 2000. What Batman Returns kind of, how it wielded the power of camp and theatricality. X-Men wields this very realistic it's as if superheroes in the real world in which we live. After all, we open up on, World War II. And so it's like this story is really taking place it's grounded in reality, even though we have superheroes in this world. And X-Men 2000 also, in my opinion, gave birth to what we have today. Batman 89 launched it all out the gate. And then in 2000, we have X-Men kind of redefining the superhero movie. And even though I'd say 2 and 3, not as compelling as the first one, it still is responsible for kind of re-energizing, this desire to see these movies. It gets a lot of, it took what X-Men the animated series did and grabbed a lot of the fans from that, of which I was one. That's how I was introduced to X-Men, was through the animated series, and brought a lot of that into this, but grounded it in the real world. And I like how it's this realistic approach, but it also meets this high concept cinema. Great ensemble cast, each with emotional arcs, very much character driven, particularly with Captain Picard, Sir Patrick Stewart, as Xavier, and Gandalf, i.e. Sir Ian McKellen, playing Magneto. I love seeing those two in those roles. I can't ever see anybody else playing Captain Picard. I can't see anybody else ever playing Xavier, except for Sir Patrick Stewart. McAvoy's a close second. But it's very much character driven. It was a star-making machine, and it was smart world building with very high stakes. But as much fun as I know we would have continuing our discussion on some of our most favorite superhero and comic book movies, Adam, I am afraid that we are nearing the end of our show today. So, Adam, I want to thank you so much for making a return visit to Real Talk today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate any opportunity to talk about movies. Is a good one for me.
I love sitting down and speaking with you as well. I feel like I'm always learning from all my guests. So thank you very much, you and all the guests I have on the show, for teaching me, because then I can go back and discover movies that maybe I hadn't heard of before, or maybe need to go and revisit. So, Adam, where can listeners find out more information about you and your reviews?
I do YouTube videos, hard reviews. Hello, Adam Ryan Donato reviews. It's just me in front of a camera talking about how I feel about movies passionately. I also write for Disappointment Media. I'm a contributor for them. I also do a podcast called The Adam Steve Show with my good old buddy from college, Steve, where we just kind of ramble about movies that we like. But thank you guys very much for having me.
And thank you very much for coming on today. Listeners, if you missed any of today's episode or to listen to past episodes of Real Talk or other shows on WKGC, we are on a podcatcher near you. So search for WKGC Public Media on your podcast service of choice. Again, a big thank you to Adam for joining us today on Real Talk. Stay tuned for Jazz in a Minor Key with Walter Hale coming up next, followed by All Things Considered starting at 3 o'clock. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll tune in next week, same time, same place, for more Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC.